So how do we bring this into life for us right now? How do we boil this down? Well, here's some action steps you can take. The first one is to let the sun shine in. I even listened to that song first thing this morning with the fifth dimension. Let the sun shine in. But I mean, let Jesus shine into your lives. That is, be vulnerable to Jesus as he's been vulnerable with you. Open yourselves up to have this relationship with God, and pull back the curtains and tear down the walls of how you keep God at bay. And actually embrace a relationship with Jesus Christ and live as though you were walking with him side by side, because he's been there the whole time, whether you've realized it or not. And when you do that one thing, recognizing your relationship with God, it will change how you walk in this world, and people are going to notice that. And then as you let yourself be vulnerable with God, then it allows you to let yourself be vulnerable with others, which brings me to the next point, and that is get thrown under a bus. That's what happens when you put yourself in a vulnerable situation. You might find yourself thrown under a bus. Something might go wrong. I worked with a project years ago that was high profile and lots of tension that went with it. And when things went wrong, somebody was going to be held accountable, even when sometimes the things that went wrong were truly out of anybody's control, just an issue of circumstance. And sometimes the deal was a portion of the team just had to say, all right, boss, we got to move on from this. I'll just own it. Let me take it, and I'll be responsible for it. And so what ended up happening is on the team, sometimes we would be the ones quick to just like, you know what, it's my turn to get thrown under the bus. Let's just do it. Throw my name out there, say it was my fault so we can move on and keep the project going. And the joke was that after you've been thrown under the bus a couple of times, buses have actually pretty good clearance. I mean, and once you know where the oil pan is, the transfer case, stay away from the muffler on your way out the back. I mean, I'm not saying that it's fun, but you get up on the other side and you're like, oh gosh, all right, let's get back to it. That's what life can be like sometimes. You let yourself be vulnerable, and sometimes you'll find yourself coming out the backside of the bus. Well, bummer. But guess what? You stood back up because God was there with you the whole time anyway, and you do it again. And you do it again, and you do it again. And as you get to be vulnerable and people see that you're willing to make sacrifice for them, you will earn that trust and that credibility with them. Which then brings me to the last point. The whole idea, this journey of friendship is about flinching first. Be the first one to choose to trust. Be the first one to say, you know what, I'm not afraid to see what's going to happen here. And yeah, it may go terribly sideways, but I'm going to flinch first. I am going to be the one that when something goes wrong, go to them and say, hey, listen, I forgive you. Or maybe it's the other way around. You've done something wrong, and you go to them and say, listen, I've wronged you, whether you realize it or not, and I just need to let you know it. I'm sorry. And that's making yourself vulnerable. I know this. Everyone in this room has been in that situation where you've done something wrong, but you notice that nobody around you noticed. And you think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to shut up. But it takes integrity to go to someone and say, you know what, I've done you wrong, and it's my fault, and I'm sorry. When you make yourself vulnerable in that way, well, then your relationship can actually go to a deeper level. And trust builds more trust, and openness builds more openness. And in God's time, those friendships that we're stepping into where we're being vulnerable, God will start to reveal his identity through you into those relationships. Or maybe you'll discover that God is revealing himself through the other person. That's just the way God works. We get to share in God's moving within our relationships, because at the heart of friendship is love. And God is all about love. And so that's the call for us, is that we contemplate how we can be vulnerable in the relationships that we have and let those relationships go someplace even deeper by God's grace.